Welcome to the Courier Journals, conversations from the front line of the courier and logistics industry. Hello and welcome back to the Courier Journals. Thank you ever so much for tuning in. And wow, it's been a while. Been a while since we've recorded a solo episode, and I can only apologise for that. But it has been, let's say, a hectic couple of weeks, and I feel like I say that every time that I come on the pod, but truly it just seems to be getting busier and busier. I am hopefully in a position where I can be passing over a little bit of my workload, which should then in turn hopefully allow me to have the time and energy, I think more importantly, to be able to come and deliver these podcasts for you, because essentially I could come on and I could talk in a monotone and I could not be enthusiastic about the pod, and I could do that for you, but I want to be able to do this with enthusiasm. This is something I'm really enthusiastic about, so I want to have the energy to do that, and the only way that I can do that is by freeing up a little bit of my workload. So yeah, sorry for the boring intro, but anyway, in other news, if you've not listened to the previous episode with Justin Roberts, one of my former colleagues, please go and give it a listen. Justin is a sales professional within his own right, especially within the logistics sector. He's won awards for his innovation within sales in the logistics sector, so go and give that a listen. He offers some genuine real insight into sales really within the courier industry, so go and give it a listen. Episode 10 of the Courier Journals. Now, before we sort of deep dive into this week's episode topic, I did want to first of all give a couple of shout outs, because whilst I have had this time off, and believe me, it hasn't been intentional, it's purely just been because of my workload recently, it's been really, really nice to obviously receive some of your messages, some of the feedback on YouTube, social media, various platforms, whether it be Facebook, Insta, TikTok, etc. So thank you ever so much. And even emails, some of you guys have been reaching out on email, which I'll come into shortly. So thank you, it really does mean a lot. First of all, Paul Davis on YouTube, he put, in response to episode 9, which was the biggest lies in logistics, he put, "Hi Emma, Paul Davis here from Yodel Logistics. Just wanted to say thank you for putting out the podcast. You just got me through a drive from Manchester to Inverness. Such informative vids. Thanks again. Keep up the good work." Thanks very much, Paul, for your feedback, and I do hope that was a safe journey. A fair old journey that from Manchester to Inverness. I don't envy you whatsoever. I can remember doing a small move a couple of years ago, going up to Inverness, and my goodness, this is going completely on a tangent here, but being female, guys, offers a completely different narrative to being that of a male when you need the toilet and you're on a route like the one to Inverness. All I can remember is travelling for miles and miles and miles and having the most uncomfortable pain in my bladder. I don't think I could walk by the time that I actually made the toilet. It was, different breed. But anyway, we move. Another comment that we've had was regarding our conversations that we've been having. If anyone's been listening to previous episodes, I've been having conversations with a new entry to the multi-drop market, which essentially are really going to be competing with Every. So they're going to be a big hitter in the market. Now, I had a comment, again, someone trying to ask me who's the new entry to the market, and whilst I still can't say, because I'm not filming, but I'm recording this on the 29th of June, and today we've just had our first driver go in for training with a go live date of the 1st of July. So whilst I can't say who they are, what I can tell you is obviously things have progressed and we are at the go live stage. Now, we actually refused the opportunity to work in the Midlands despite the amount of areas and routes that we were offered. I'll be honest, the money just wasn't in it. We've talked about this before, about margins being really small in multi-drop, but there's really small and then there's utterly ridiculous. Unfortunately, that probably fell more towards the utterly ridiculous end of the spectrum. And the problem that we have, guys, is that people that are working in the multi-drop sector now, that are doing things like the likes of Every, etc., that might be doing it on a per parcel rate, they're the ones at the forefront of these conversations to these new entrants, and they're turning around saying to these people, yeah, we get paid this. And then therefore these new entrants feel like actually that if they offer 5p or 10p per parcel extra, that's adequate enough to bring on better drivers, when the reality is it's not enough really to attract good quality drivers. Having said that, we've got a really good guy that's working for us, well, potentially going to be working for us, should I say, down in the southeast. And yeah, fingers crossed that it goes to plan. He's enthusiastic, we're enthusiastic, and as it goes, a lot of people think that the main contractor makes all the margin out of this. I will declare this live on this podcast right now, even though we're not live, but I will declare this on this podcast right now. We're going to be making the same margin that our driver is making. No more, no less. The same margin. So our driver, or what will be our main subcontractor, will make the exact same margin as the overall contractor. And there'll be people that are listening to this going, well, actually the driver should be making more. There's an argument to say that the driver is doing a lot of the work. However, the driver doesn't see the admin that we've put in so far and that we'll continue to do. The driver hasn't seen the level of marketing or sales that's met this contract come to life, and they've not been involved in that full-on sales cycle that realistically has probably took the best part of 3 months to get to this point. So with all due respect, the driver deserves an awful lot because they're the ones at the forefront of this. But equally, if the driver rocks up ill, or the driver can't work, he's on holiday, whatever should I say, we're the ones responsible for finding that cover. So I understand the driver should be getting a certain amount, but so should we. And I actually think that the driver's on a hell of a deal, really, getting literally the same amount of profit as the main contractor. But yeah, so that's where we are with that, and that's going live in a matter of days. So hopefully on the next episode I can kind of share a bit more insight. But as things stand, both us and our brand new subcontractor are really excited about the brand new contract. For anyone that listened to my episode with Christopher Allcroft, that's also been receiving some feedback lately, especially when it comes to that of DX versus Amazon, and as a courier, which one is better, which is worse. And we've had a couple of comments recently. One from our Instagram was L Green Logistics, where Liam said, DX seem to make every delivery harder than it needs to be. At least with Amazon, you've got a bit more flexibility when it comes to safe places. I think flexibility is an understatement, right? If you've done Amazon before, or if you've seen Amazon drivers delivering, flexibility is a wide, I don't even know the word that I want to use here, but yeah, if you've seen an Amazon driver, essentially a safe place is lifting up a shed load of stones, placing the parcel underneath said stones, and leaving it and hoping for the best. That is the degree of flexibility sometimes that you see with Amazon drivers. And listen, I think I've said it before, I've said it again, I've done Amazon myself. I know the amount of stress, the rush and everything else that Amazon drivers have got to go through daily, so I get it. I've probably been guilty of putting stones on parcels myself in the past. We've all been there. But yeah, there's certainly a degree of flexibility compared to that of DX. I guess the metrics are certainly a lot tighter with DX. I had another comment, and unfortunately I can't read out the person's name, but it was from ss2803 _ on TikTok, and they've said, I did both. Both depends on the route. The Amazon app is a lot more advanced than the DX devices, which makes it easier. DX app had me going back and forth 15 minutes each way, even loading the van. Amazon, you can load 300 parcels in 5 to 10 minutes in order. In DX, it takes at least an hour for a decent route. DX is slavery compared to Amazon. And that is a super interesting feedback, isn't it? Because when I speak to new drivers and I'm onboarding them and I'm recruiting them, I said it to Chris at the time when we was recording. When you're speaking to a new driver and you're telling them, and I say a new driver that might have done something like Amazon or something like that previously, where the drop count was super, super high, they come in and they listen to you pitch DX to them and they get so excited because they think, oh, well, that'll be an absolute breeze, 60, 70 drops in a day. And, I'm used to 180 at Amazon. So they think it's going to be an absolute breeze. But the reality is obviously a whole lot different. So really interesting to get that feedback, and I guess essentially back up what Chris said, should I say, on the podcast. So again, a bit of a pitch, but go and listen to that episode with Chris. I can't recall for the life of me now what episode it was. It was either episode 5 or 6, but super interesting insight into sort of life within both DX and Amazon as an on-site manager, which in turn gives you that little bit of insight actually as a courier as well. I was as well up until it felt like I fell off a grid, doing a little bit of activity on Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, etc. And it was whilst on Facebook I started talking to a brand new courier company, 2 blokes in Sheffield called Jay and Jeff, and I actually had Jeff do one of my jobs over in Sheffield. Bless him, he actually went over to Driffield for me and did a job from Driffield to Goole. Jeff's in an extra long wheelbase, and if I'm not mistaken, Jay's in a long wheelbase. So please do give those guys a shout. Jeff is Jeff Lee under 07888 628 347, and he's in the Sheffield area. Give him a shout if you've got any work. Can't recommend Jeff more highly enough. He did a superb job for me that day, and as I say, he actually went out of his way, because if I'm not mistaken, it was the day after England's first World Cup game and I was really struggling for cover, and Jeff, as I say, went out of his way and covered that job for me. So thank you, Jeff. I am super grateful. But equally, please do also speak with Jay as well. Jay is on 07863 515 475. So anyone that's looking for long wheelbase or extra long wheelbase vans, because I'm pretty sure Jeff falls under that category, go and give those guys a shout if you're based in the Sheffield area. Thank you very much, guys, for the excellent work you did. We also got another email off Don Morley, who started up his own new podcast. Thanks, Don, for dropping us an email. I think Don is based over in High Wycombe, if I'm not mistaken. I've given his podcast a little listen. His company name is Plan B Logistics. So Don's also set up himself too. If you are into your podcast, then go and give Don a follow as well. And it's took us the best part of 15 minutes to get to this point, which really goes to show just how long it's been, doesn't it? So I do apologise. As I say, I will get a little bit more in a routine, hopefully, when this bit of workload has been taken away from me. That's the main thing, and the workload that's being taken away from me is actually the operational side of the same day courier work stuff, because as I've mentioned to you, my focus with the same day stuff is purely customer service. If you're delivering excellent customer service, your customers will stick around, and that's echoed really in the conversation that I had with Justin on the previous episode. But today we're talking about something every courier company, driver, transport manager, everyone really within the industry has an opinion on, and that is rates. Where do you even start? because customers think transport's expensive, drivers think they aren't paid enough, and then operators are struggling to make a profit. So where is the money all going? I think the first thing that I want to point out here, right, especially when it comes to the same day side of things, is you're not paying for the 30-minute drive. You're paying for having a vehicle available exactly when you need it, right? Because that's always the argument that people say, especially drivers, and I see it all the time on Facebook groups and things like that, is they'll put a price on there and they'll say that their argument for putting a £200 price for a long wheelbase van on a 60-mile job is because they're offering a premium service and they can get to the collection point within 10-15 minutes. And whilst categorically, by the way, guys, I will never go for that price, but whilst that is true to a certain extent, trying to explain that to a customer is a whole different ballgame. And the reason for that is they're comparing courier prices to parcel prices. Right? So one of our biggest customers actually uses TNT on a next day basis, and they will send out as much as they possibly can with TNT sooner than what they'll send it out with us. And I don't blame them. Listen, we're in an economy that is on its arse. I do not blame them for trying to save some money where they can. But what they've also come to realise is TNT aren't reliable. They might be more reliable than some. Listen, I'm not here to judge the next day network. I don't know enough about it, if I'm being brutally honest. So I'm not judging. But what they'll do is they don't trust TNT. So if they've got anything that needs to be there by a certain time or at a certain time, then they will use us. So I don't need to educate them on the difference between courier prices and parcel prices and the difference in service that you receive. They already understand it. But if you are speaking to someone that doesn't normally use same day, then you do have to educate them. We've talked about this before. And that is the major difference really between the same day and the next day networks. You know, your next day networks, whilst they're getting better, they aren't quite reliable as your same day service. You know, one pallet, unfortunately, with a next day service, well, not unfortunately, fortunately with a next day service, is going to cost you less than £100 to move, as even if it's going over a 200-mile radius. With us, with the same day provider, it's probably going to, if it's going over 100 miles, it's going to cost you at least £100, absolute minimum. You know, so these are things that you've always got to educate your customers on. And that's why they think it's expensive. But we've spoke about this in the past, where if you educate them, it doesn't seem as expensive. They also don't factor in the empty mileage. You know, I had someone today, it was a quote from Huddersfield to Uxbridge. And we was quoting our customer, who was then quoting their customer. And we quoted somewhere in the region, I think it was around £650. Don't quote me, I can't remember what size vehicle it was for, but it most certainly wasn't a small van. Believe it or not, there are people out there that do quote that size for that price for a small van. And then they wonder why they can't get their own direct customers. I say no more. But anyway, reverting back. So we've costed up this job for Huddersfield to Uxbridge, and the lady turns around and was thinking, I was thinking it was going to be more around the £350 mark. Do these people not understand that the vehicles do not run on air? The drivers, they're actually physical. They actually drive the vehicle from A to B. So the vehicles don't just run themselves. They don't just drive themselves. We're not yet at that point with technology. So there's someone physically in the vehicle. There's fuel that we have to pay for that goes in the vehicle because it doesn't run on air. And actually, behind all of that as well, 9 times out of 10, if you're using a larger network, you've actually got someone that's sat at a desk keeping you updated as to ETAs, where your driver is, and your pod, when it's actually been delivered, is going to be sent to you straight away. Do people not comprehend this? You can tell it's been a while, guys, can't you, since I last recorded an episode, because I can feel myself going off on a tangent. I really can. The other thing, naturally, is vehicle availability. I know I alluded to it before, and I gave you some ridiculous example about the price that people want to charge because of vehicle availability. But sometimes you've got to pay for that empty mileage in between. If you are in the arse end of nowhere and you need a collection, then it probably is going to cost you more than what it would if you was in the middle of bloody Birmingham, because there's an awful lot of difference in terms of the availability of drivers around you. The other thing, and gosh, this really does need its own episode, waiting time. All right. We allocate 30 minutes free waiting time either side before we start charging, but that in whole is an hour. So it's an hour's worth of time that we give you and we allocate your delivery. Whilst technically it's free, we've got to put a bit of margin in there for that. That's an hour that a driver is essentially dedicated to your booking, and we can't charge you any more for it. So that's got to be factored in as well. And these are all things that customers just don't see. I mean, the other general obvious things is insurance, vehicle finance, maintenance, tyres, compliance, public liability, the wages of the people in the office that are obviously controlling these things day to day, the office rent, whilst we're on the topic of office, software, whether that be CX or another transport application that you use. By the way, any applications, any people that either are listening to this and might sell applications, or anyone that can recommend any controller applications or anything like that, please reach out to me. We're in a position now where we really need that. So please reach out to me at the Courier Journals at outlook.com or on any of our social media channels. Not challenge, although sometimes it can be a challenge to post regularly. But yeah, they're all things that every job has before a van even turns a wheel. Yet customers just seem to completely disregard that at the time when they're booking and cannot comprehend the price. And honestly, I genuinely believe it's because of such small price we pay for delivery when it comes to things like Shein or TikTok or Temu or anything that's coming just on a next day, Amazon, whatever it may be. They're automatically trying to compare the two on price when actually the service offering is so different. But that said, we've had the conversation before about how the multi-drop rates aren't the best in the world, but they keep cash flow really consistent, margins are small, etc. And obviously that's another frustrating problem within itself, because they're as low as what they are, because as we've just mentioned, parcel rates themselves are so low when it comes to delivery, but yet a customer will be the first to complain when an every driver lobs the parcel over the wall as they're trying to make sure that they're getting the deliveries done so they actually get paid, and also that they're actually doing it quick enough to be able to get all the deliveries done within a reasonable time, to quantify the fact that they are self-employed, they're not going to get any holidays, and actually they're probably are trying to achieve a decent amount of money earned per hour. And what we fail to mention within all of this is that whilst the costs of every other industry, wages as a whole, national minimum wage is increasing, which is in turn because obviously the cost of living's increasing, we're in an industry where the prices are so outdated and yet they don't seem to be rising. And the funny thing is that I was working for a company that did put price increases in place. I've spoken previously how I've worked for companies that don't have their own fleet but yet add a fuel surcharge on. And then the amount of companies that do that, by the way, is astronomical. There are fuel charges on receipts, if you will, on invoices, should I say. There are crisis charges. That's a new one that I've heard when I've been competing for a new bit of work recently. So all of these, and yet these companies don't even have their own fleets. Now, don't get me wrong, if we were seeing that fuel surcharge being passed on to the driver, then it makes total sense. But I know full well that does not happen. As I say, I've worked for a large enough firm, and I've competed with large enough firms for new work that I know don't have their own fleet, to know that these things are happening in our industry. And that's when I kind of don't blame the drivers for getting on the high horse. They know that these massive firms are charging fuel surcharges and they aren't getting a penny of it. It's a really damaging industry from that perspective, and equally it makes it even more damaging when they're kind of I guess they're taking advantage of the fact that the fuel price is rocketing, but yet not paying the drivers as a result of that. And of course, with the rising cost of living comes the price of vehicle repairs increasing, insurance increases. You're then having to work longer hours as drivers to try and maximise your income. That might then include nights away from your family. All of these things contribute to the fact that realistically, drivers do deserve better rates. As operators, I guess we've got to decide whether we're being fair enough with our margins. Do the drivers deserve more? There's been ample time where a driver has quoted a very low rate on one of my jobs, and I've thought to myself, no, you know what? I'm actually going to give you a little bit more for that. We had someone doing a job for us in South Wales the other week, and he quoted, it blessed him, to be fair. He was trying to help his son out a little bit. His son was coming to help us with a handballing job, and his son was meeting one of our drivers to help our driver get the goods off the vehicle. So it was just a helping hand. It was just to give him a little bit of something to, I guess, pocket money wise, even though the lad was 18. And he bidded something like 30 quid, and he just said, I'm happy, Emma. I just want to get the lad out of bed and get him earning a bit of dollar, a bit of some money. And I said, look, you know what, we've got the margin in this, let me give you 60 for it. I said hopefully that'll encourage him, if there is any more work down the line, that he can come and help as well. And lo and behold, the lad did a cracking job, and we paid him 60 because we had the margin in it to do so. And they're sometimes the types of approach that operators make. And equally now I know that if ever I'm speaking to this bloke later down the line, and he might price me a little bit further out than what I'd like to be at, I can turn around and say, Jeff, or whatever his name may be, can you come down a little bit on that rate, because I don't have the margin in that this time. And hopefully at that point he'll know that actually if I did have the margin, I'd pay him for that. So I think the main point is that most drivers, they aren't trying to become mega rich, although I say that, and some of the prices that I do see are contrary to that opinion, because to me, I read some comments right on social media and the prices that people want to charge me, and half of the time I feel like turning round saying, you're subcontracting for us, not the other way around. And equally, it's our customer, not yours. You're trying to charge me an end user price when you're subcontracting for me. CX is not that platform. CX isn't a platform with end users on it. You're subcontracting for other courier companies. You can't charge them a premium because why? Go and get your own customer. It just these are little things that grind my gears. So yeah, but by the same token, I understand that a lot of drivers out there, especially those that have been in the game for a while, that understand the nature of subcontracting, understand that they can charge their end user a premium, that understand the differences essentially, they're the ones that they aren't necessarily trying to become billionaires. But they aren't trying to do any of that. They're simply trying to earn a decent living. I spoke to a lady that I would really love to mention eventually on the pod, and I'm sure I will end up speaking to her again at some stage, but she runs a small courier firm that, I'll be honest, when after speaking to her, has said that she purely runs on CX. She doesn't do any extra work. She doesn't have her own direct customers. She literally runs a fleet of CX. And to be fair to her, she's done really well for herself. But she's she's not trying to do exactly what I've just said there. She's not trying to become a millionaire, and that reflects in her prices. And I think, to be fair, I think she's only got the 2 drivers on CX, but they're 2 blooming good drivers. We use them all the time. If they bid on my job, they get that job. It's that simple. If I know they're available, I mean, sometimes I don't even go to CX, if I'm honest. Sometimes I just go direct and I ask them themselves if they're available, especially if I know it's a job that they've done before and they know well. But my point being is that she's not trying to become a millionaire, but then because she's not interested in getting her own direct customers, she also knows the difference between direct customer rates and subcontractor rates. So we always get charged, albeit, we'll pay decent money. So I think we've, just to quote some of the jobs, well, one of the jobs, because it's been sold today, that we've gave to them was to London. It was 220 miles from up north, and we've given them £270 on that job. No congestion charge or anything like that. It was for a long wheelbase van, not an abnormal load. Pretty standard. I think it was about 500, 600 kilos. So yeah, they get paid half decent money for us for a subcontractor rate. Although I'm sure that there'll be people listening now telling me that that's a shocking rate, as they always do. But we think it's a decent rate that they pay them, and they're always happy as well. So it swings and roundabouts. But the main point of the message is that essentially drivers do probably warrant earning better rates than what they're getting. So I guess we're now at a point where we turn around saying, right, well, if drivers aren't earning the money, then operators surely are. And we've obviously just alluded to this a little bit, but as I say, it's not always the case. So I can tell you that I think tomorrow, as things stand, we've got around 7 or 8 same day bookings. Okay, and one of them we literally are making less than 10% on the job. And I think that's sometimes what people don't understand. And then people turn around and say, well, so you should be. Absolutely, so you should be, because you're not doing the work, you're not the driver on the road, blah, 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 blah. Well, actually, we do still have our own fleet that we do maximise in sort of quieter times for our multi-drop work, but also that customer cost us money to get in the first place. We've got a sales team, we've got a marketing team that are designed to get these customers for us. So they cost money. So whilst I appreciate that the driver is doing most of the work when we do win the work, however long that may take to actually win, we've actually put an investment into that customer to get them in the first place. We're also the ones that are the customer service behind the scenes. So it's not always the driver that's picking up the call at 2 a.m. during out of hours to make that booking. These are all the things that just seem to go totally amiss when we turn around and we say drivers deserve all the money. Drivers certainly do deserve most of the money because they're doing most of the job. But equally, what is the point in us getting a customer on, converting a customer, if we're also not going to take our share of the profit margin? So I get it. I do get it. And sometimes, as I've mentioned, we work on margins so tiny just because we don't want to lose that customer, because that's the nature of the beast of the industry that we're in. If you didn't listen to my last episode with Justin Roberts, I encourage you to go and do so. Justin is a sales professional. He works for a very, very large courier firm and ultimately knows his way around logistics, especially when it comes to sales. And he'll tell you himself on that episode, so much of the nature of the beast at the minute comes down to price. And sometimes we have to take those small margins just to keep that customer on board. The other thing that Justin mentioned that's also really prevalent in the industry was how he talked about the market being saturated. And he's absolutely right. And one example I'll give you of this, right, is we've got a customer, fairly new customer. We've won a lot of business from them lately, and they're sending us jobs to quote on somewhere between 3:30 and 4:30 every day. And all they'll do is they'll send us the list of jobs. They'll ask for quotes, and then we don't hear back from them till 5 o'clock or gone 5. So then we're in out of hours and we're then having to allocate and assign these jobs to drivers, which again, we don't charge any more to our company for, even though we are in out of hours. So another example of slavery within logistics. But because they're doing that and we know that they're sending it on to a competitor as well and ultimately waiting for the prices, and we know that because we'll get book this job and this job, cancel the other requests. So we know that that's happening. That also is driving the price down because again, we're then thinking, right, well, we didn't win a job in this postcode at this price last time, so let's price at this. And it's a knock-on effect every single time, and it's because the market is just so oversaturated. I mean, as it goes, we get some decent rates out of those guys, so I can't argue, and I'm sure the other company and the courier firm that we're competing with for that particular work are also getting some good rates. I can only assume that they are anyway. But we're all contributing, I guess, in the race to the bottom, but it really is because the industry itself is so saturated. What we've started doing, to be completely honest with you, is if I'm not interested in the job, then I will purposely bid high, and you're going to pay me a premium if you want me to cover that job. So for example, I've had a lot of jobs it's been down in Torquay and things like that at 7:30 in the morning. If you think I'm getting up out of bed out of hours for that job at 7:30 in the morning to make sure that that driver's on time, because don't forget, if the actual job's booked for 7:30, I'm going to be up earlier to make sure that the driver's on his way. So I'm actually going to be up at 6 a.m. for this one job. So if you think that you're paying pittance for that job, you've got another thing coming. The only way that I really see things improving in terms of rates and things like that is kind of, again, alluding back to that conversation with Justin, is we've got to start creating better relationships with our customers. As the supplier, it's 100% what you've got to do. With any good relationship comes trust and confidence, which again are two of the things that Justin alluded to. And once you've got both of those things, people will start choosing reliability over the cheapest quote. And the proof's in the pudding, because when you look at the operators that use CX, there's just, as ourselves, for example, as I've just spoken about this company that have the 2 drivers that we use all the time. Even if, I mentioned the £270 job, for example, that we gave to that driver, we had quotes lower than that. We had quotes, from what I can remember off the top of my head, we had quotes for 230. Started at about 230 and it went all the way through to, I think, 320, maybe 350. But again, I'm just not going to go with them rates. And the crazy thing is some of them people actually quoting the 350 rate, they've not even got full glowing feedback. They've actually got some negative rates in there, so it baffles the brain that they think they can do that, but nevertheless it's CX for you. But if we encourage them to do that, so they're choosing reliability rather than the cheapest quote, then we will start to build an industry where we are paying sustainable rates. We're paying rates that make the job worthwhile doing. I think the other thing that they've got to understand as well is the better drivers are professionals at what they do. There's some horror stories out there, certainly with some of the drivers that we've worked with on CX, and the quality drivers are extremely professional. They understand that when they pick up your delivery and they deliver that to your customer, they are a reflection of your brand. And again, that should be a selling point for yourselves, especially if you've got your own vehicles, and you are delivering on behalf of your own end consumer. You're delivering on behalf of that customer. You are a representation of them. So if you've got a stinky attitude with the forklift driver at the other side because he's on his break or whatever it may be, however you behave is a reflection of your customer, essentially. And the other thing, and I seem to mention this on every single episode, is educate your customers in what they're buying into. You're not buying into a parcel service on a next day service. You know, this, what you're asking us to deliver, and I think that's the funny thing, is they're 9 times out of 10 when they're delivering same day, they're delivering something that costs more than the value of the actual delivery. It's the only thing that makes sense, because who on God's green earth would pay more for the delivery than the product for itself? You just never would. So if that's the case, 9 times out of 10, them goods, should I say, are normally worth a couple of £1,000s. That's the whole reason why goods in transit's in place for the amount that it is. You know, so all these things you should be explaining to your customers all the time. You know, if you're delivering something for Shein or TikTok, fair enough, the value of the parcel's not that great. A little bit of insight, this brand new entry to the market, they've also turned around and said, you know, the goods aren't high value because they're Shein and TikTok. The proof is in the pudding with all of this, guys. It really is. So educate your customers on same day. Make them understand that actually the product that they're moving, it should be paramount that it arrives there safely, and it should be paramount that it arrives there in a professional manner, delivered by a professional driver and a professional organisation. These should all be parts of your selling point. And all that time off, all that time away, has quite clearly got me on a bit of a rampage, hasn't it? But this episode wasn't about blaming customers, drivers or courier companies. It's about understanding each other's challenges, and God knows we're facing a lot of them in the industry at the minute. I think the main picture that I'm trying to create is that if we want a healthy logistics industry, we need sustainable pricing that allows businesses to invest, drivers to earn fairly, and customers to receive the reliable service that they expect. And that's the bottom line. It really is. But all that aside, I have ranted and raved for the best part of 40 minutes now, and I'd love to hear your opinion. Are courier rates too high? Are they too low? Or are we simply caught in a race to the bottom? I've got a feeling that a lot of people are going to say it's either too low or it's a race to the bottom. However, what I am keen to know is, how much do you think that the operators are earning? You know, there are some operators that earn some decent money, and then they're passing on a bit of a shitty rate really to the driver. I'm keen to get your feedback. Are the operators earning a shed ton of money in your opinion, and the drivers are coming out with pittance? Or is it a case of everyone's contributing? Really, really keen to get your guys' opinion. So do leave a comment on Spotify, on YouTube, or get in touch with us on social media. We're most likely, as you guys know, we do like to feature your thoughts on the episode. So please do leave us some feedback, some comments, and certainly leave us your suggestions on that particular question. Thank you for listening, and hopefully I'll see you on the next episode.